I answered my husband's phone. A woman whispered, "I love you." And when I knew the voice, my name is Corinne, and at 35 years old, I thought I had the perfect marriage. 10 years with Derek, building our dream life together in suburban Chicago. That Tuesday morning started like any other until I answered his forgotten phone. A female voice whispered those 3 words, "I love you." My blood ran cold as recognition dawned. That voice belonged to someone I trusted completely. Someone who had sat across from me at dinner parties and smiled. Someone far closer than I ever imagined. If you're watching this, let me know where you're from in the comments. Like and subscribe if you've ever had your trust shattered and want to hear how I rebuilt my life from the ashes of betrayal. Derek and I met during our junior year of college. I was studying interior design, and he was majoring in finance. We literally bumped into each other at the campus coffee shop. I spilled my latte all over his economics textbook. I was mortified and offered to buy him a new one, but he just laughed it off and asked for my number instead. That moment started a whirlwind romance that swept me off my feet. After graduation, we both landed jobs in Chicago. I joined a boutique interior design firm, while Derek secured a position as a junior financial analyst at Wellington & Barnes, a prestigious investment firm. We moved into a tiny apartment together and spent weekends hunting for vintage furniture at flea markets that I would restore. Those early days were magical, full of dreams and possibilities. 3 years later, Derek proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. It wasn't an elaborate proposal, just the two of us walking along the shore at sunset when he got down on one knee. The simplicity made it perfect. We were married 6 months later in a ceremony with our closest friends and family. Over the next several years, we built what I thought was an enviable life. Derek climbed the corporate ladder, eventually becoming a senior financial advisor, managing high net worth clients. I had established myself as a respected interior designer, even starting to take on some independent projects while maintaining my position at the firm. We bought a beautiful colonial-style home in a leafy suburb with enough space for the family we planned to have someday. Our social circle consisted mainly of Derek's colleagues and their spouses, along with a few of my industry connections. We hosted dinner parties, attended charity galas, and took vacations to places that looked perfect on Instagram. My younger sister Amanda lived about an hour away. Unlike me, she was still finding her path, jumping between jobs and relationships. Despite our different lifestyles, we remained incredibly close. She was always my confidant, the person I could call at midnight when I needed to talk. Derek sometimes joked that Amanda was the spontaneous sister, and I was the responsible one, but he adored her too, treating her like his own sister. At Wellington & Barnes, Derek had formed a close friendship with his colleague Jackson. They had started at the company around the same time and had supported each other through various professional challenges. Jackson was quieter than Derek, more thoughtful in his approach, but they complemented each other well. He was a regular at our gatherings, though usually came alone since his divorce 3 years earlier. Then there was Stephanie, my best friend since we met at a design conference 5 years ago. By coincidence, she ended up taking a marketing position at Wellington & Barnes 2 years back. I was thrilled that my best friend and my husband would be working together. Stephanie had been through a difficult divorce last year, and I had been her rock throughout the process. She was beautiful, smart, and ambitious, someone I admired tremendously. I never once thought her presence in our lives would become the catalyst for its destruction. Just a month before everything fell apart, Derek and I celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. He surprised me with a weekend at the luxury hotel where we had spent our wedding night. We drank champagne, reminisced about our years together, and made love like newlyweds. He looked into my eyes and told me he had never been happier. I believed him completely. Looking back, there were signs I chose to ignore. Derek had been working late more frequently. His phone would ding with notifications that he would quickly dismiss. Sometimes he would step outside to take calls. When I asked casual questions about his day, his answers became vague, lacking the details he used to share. But I trusted him implicitly. After 10 years together, suspicion was the furthest thing from my mind. I remember Stephanie coming over for dinner around that time. She brought an expensive bottle of wine and seemed overly interested in Derek's recent business trip to New York. At one point, they both laughed about some inside joke from the office that I wasn't part of. It stung slightly, but I brushed it off as workplace camaraderie. That night, after Stephanie left, Derek was especially attentive and loving toward me. Now I understand why. Guilt can sometimes masquerade as affection. Our life seemed perfect on the surface. The successful couple with the beautiful home, fulfilling careers, and strong marriage. But perfection is often an illusion, a carefully constructed facade, hiding fractures beneath. And sometimes it takes just one moment, one whispered phrase to shatter everything you thought you knew. It was a Tuesday morning in April. The spring weather had finally broken through after a particularly brutal Chicago winter. Sunlight streamed through our kitchen windows as I prepared breakfast. Derek was running late for work, rushing around the house collecting his things. "Have you seen my blue tie, the one with the subtle pattern?" he called from upstairs. "Check the laundry room," I replied. "I think I saw it hanging there yesterday." He thundered down the stairs a minute later, tie in hand. "You're a lifesaver," he said, kissing me quickly on the cheek. He gulped down the coffee I had poured him and grabbed his briefcase. "Don't forget we have dinner with the Harrisons tonight," I reminded him as he headed for the door. "Right 7:30, I'll meet you there directly from work," he said, checking his watch. "I might be cutting it close with this client meeting, but I'll make it work." With another quick kiss, he was gone, the door slamming behind him. I finished my breakfast in the peaceful quiet of our home, mentally planning the client presentation I had scheduled for later that morning. I was loading the dishwasher when I noticed Derek's personal phone on the counter. He carried two phones, his personal one and a work phone, and in his rush, he had left the personal one behind. I picked it up thinking I would drop it off at his office on my way to my client meeting. As I held it, the screen lit up with a notification. Then another, and another. All text messages, but the preview didn't show the sender or content due to his privacy settings. It struck me as odd, since Derek rarely received so many personal messages, especially early in the morning. I was about to put it in my purse when it began to ring in my hand. The caller ID simply said, "Work." I figured it might be important if they were calling his personal phone, so I answered. "Hello, Derek's phone," I said cheerfully. There was a pause on the other end. Then softly, intimately, a woman's voice whispered, "I love you." My breath caught in my throat. The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment. "Hello," I managed to say, my voice suddenly shaky. The caller immediately hung up. I stood frozen in our sunny kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, though the line was dead. My hand trembled so violently that the phone slipped from my grasp and clattered onto the counter. I felt lightheaded as blood rushed from my face. Because I knew that voice, I would recognize it anywhere. It belonged to Stephanie, my best friend, the woman who had cried on my shoulder during her divorce, the woman who had been a bridesmaid at my wedding, the woman I had trusted completely. My first thought was that I must be mistaken. There had to be some explanation. Perhaps she had dialed Derek accidentally, thinking she was calling someone else. Perhaps she was joking around. Perhaps I had misheard entirely, but deep down I knew. The intimate tone, the whispered words, they weren't meant for just a colleague or a friend. They were the words of a lover. I sat down heavily on a kitchen stool, my legs suddenly unable to support me. My mind raced through recent memories, searching for clues I might have missed. The lingering glances, the inside jokes. The times Derek mentioned casually that he and Stephanie had grabbed lunch to discuss a marketing strategy for one of his clients. My stomach lurched as another realization hit me. Derek hadn't been calling his personal phone from work. Stephanie had been calling from her personal line but had been saved in his contacts as work to avoid suspicion. I felt physically ill, rushing to the bathroom just in time. After splashing cold water on my face, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me appeared shell-shocked, eyes wide, with disbelief and growing anger. I could have called Derek immediately. I could have texted Stephanie demanding answers. But something stopped me. A need to understand the full extent of the betrayal before confronting either of them. I needed evidence, clarity, certainty. So instead of falling apart completely, I took a deep breath and made a decision. I would investigate first, gather my thoughts, and then confront the two people who had apparently been deceiving me behind my back. I had no idea then how much worse the truth would be than even my darkest suspicions. With shaking hands, I unlocked Derek's phone. We had always known each other's passcodes, an open phone policy that I thought signified our trust. Now, that trust felt like a weapon used against me. I opened his text messages first, expecting to find incriminating exchanges with Stephanie. Surprisingly, there were none. No messages from her at all in recent weeks. The notifications I had seen must have been from someone else. His call history showed nothing unusual, either no calls to or from Stephanie. Everything looked meticulously clean, almost too clean. Then it struck me. He must be deleting their conversations. The thought of my husband and best friend being so calculated, so deliberate in their deception made my blood boil. They weren't just having an affair, they were actively covering their tracks. I sat at the kitchen table trying to recall every interaction between Derek and Stephanie that I had witnessed. There was the Christmas party at Wellington and Barnes last year, where I had found them in deep conversation by the bar, standing slightly closer than colleagues typically would. When I approached, they had separated immediately, Stephanie excusing herself to the ladies' room. There was the dinner at our house 3 weeks ago, when Derek had offered to help Stephanie carry dessert plates to the kitchen. They had been gone longer than necessary, and when they returned, Stephanie's cheeks were flushed. I had attributed it to the wine we'd been drinking. And most recently at our 10th anniversary celebration, Stephanie had given us an expensive bottle of champagne. To many more years of happiness. She had toasted looking directly at me, with what I now recognized as guilt in her eyes. I called Derek's office, using my own phone this time. "Wellington and Barnes, how may I direct your call?" the receptionist answered. Hi, this is Corinne Williams. I was hoping to surprise my husband Derek for lunch today. Could you let me know if he's available around noon? I kept my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. Oh, Mrs. Williams, I'm afraid Derek called in sick today. He won't be coming into the office. My heart sank. Another lie. Derek had left our house in his suit briefcase in hand, supposedly heading to work and an important client meeting. I see, I managed to say. He must have come down with something after he left this morning. Thank you. I ended the call and sat in stunned silence. Where was he, if not at work? The answer came to me instantly, an instinct so strong couldn't ignore it. Stephanie lived in a luxury apartment complex about 20 minutes from our house. If they were together, that's where they would be. I changed out of my home clothes into jeans and a sweater, grabbed my purse and keys, and headed out. I called my client on the way, rescheduling our meeting with a vague excuse about a family emergency. In a way that wasn't a lie, the drive to Stephanie's apartment complex felt surreal. Part of me hoped I was wrong, that there would be a reasonable explanation for everything. But another part knew what I would find. Stephanie's complex had visitor parking in front of each building. As I slowly drove through the lot, scanning each section, my heart nearly stopped. There it was. Derek's black BMW parked in a visitor spot directly in front of Stephanie's building. I pulled into a space several rows away and turned off the engine. Tears that I had been holding back now flowed freely down my cheeks. There was no more denying it, no alternative explanation that my mind could concoct. My husband and my best friend were together in her apartment, while I sat alone in my car, my world crumbling around me. I don't know how long I sat there crying silently. Eventually, I became aware of my phone ringing. It was Amanda, my sister. Hey, Corey, just checking in. We still on for lunch tomorrow? Her cheerful voice was a stark contrast to my emotional state. I cleared my throat. Yeah, of course. I didn't want to tell her yet, couldn't bear to say the words out loud. Are you okay? You sound weird. Amanda had always been perceptive. Just fighting a headache, nothing serious. The lie came easily. Take some Advil and get some rest. See you tomorrow. Love you. Love you too, I replied automatically before hanging up. I considered waiting there until Derek emerged from the building, confronting them both on the spot. But something held me back. I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. I needed time to process, to plan, to prepare myself for the conversation that would inevitably change the course of my life. I drove home, my mind cycling through memories of my relationship with Derek, searching for other signs I might have missed. By the time I arrived home, grief had begun to give way to anger. How dare they? How dare they betray me like this? The two people I trusted most in the world conspiring behind my back, making a fool of me. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, going through the motions of normal life while internally I was screaming. I canceled my remaining appointments, claiming illness. Then I waited for Derek to return home and pretend he had been at work all day. I waited to see just how convincingly my husband of 10 years could lie to my face. Derek arrived home at his usual time just after 6:30. I heard his key in the lock, the familiar sound of his briefcase being set down. In the entryway, his footsteps as he made his way to the kitchen where I was preparing dinner as if it were any normal Tuesday. Something smells amazing, he said, coming up behind me and kissing my cheek. I had to fight the urge to recoil from his touch. Just a pasta dish I wanted to try, I replied, keeping my voice casual. How was work? Derek loosened his tie and grabbed a beer from the refrigerator. Exhausting. That client meeting ran way longer than expected. Harrison kept asking the same questions over and over. I nodded, letting the lie hang in the air between us. You must be tired then. Good thing we have dinner reservations to look forward to. About that, Derek began. I was thinking maybe we should reschedule. With the day I've had, I'd rather just relax at home tonight. The Harrisons are expecting us, I said, turning to face him directly. It would be rude to cancel last minute. Derek sighed, but nodded in agreement. You're right. I'll go shower and change. We ate dinner in relative silence. I pushed pasta around my plate, my appetite non-existent. Derek, on the other hand, ate heartily, apparently unburdened by guilt. Everything okay? He asked eventually, noticing my unusual quietness. You tell me, I replied, setting down my fork. He looked confused. What do you mean, how was your day, Derek? Really, I told you busy with meetings. Why are you acting strange? That's interesting, I said, my voice deadly calm. Because when I called your office today, they said you had called in sick. The color drained from his face, and he opened his mouth and closed it again. So, I'll ask you one more time. How was your day really? My hands were trembling under the table, but I maintained eye contact. Derek's expression shifted from shock to defensive anger. You checked up on me, called my office. What the hell, Corinne? Don't turn this around on me, I said, my voice rising. You lied about where you were today. I had personal business to take care of, he said dismissively. Nothing for you to worry about. Personal business, I repeated slowly. Would this personal business have anything to do with Stephanie? His eyes widened slightly before he controlled his expression. Stephanie, what does she have to do with anything? I found your phone this morning after you left, I said. Someone called. When I answered, a woman whispered, I love you, before hanging up. It was Stephanie's voice, Derek. I would recognize it anywhere. You're being ridiculous, he scoffed, but I could see the panic in his eyes. Why would Stephanie call me to say that you probably misheard? Did I challenged. Then explain why your car was parked outside her apartment building today when you were supposedly at work. Derek pushed back from the table abruptly. You followed me. What is wrong with you? This is insane, Corinne. What's insane is you and my best friend sneaking around behind my back, I shouted, finally losing my composure. How long has it been going on? Weeks, months. Our entire marriage. You're imagining things, Derek insisted. But his defense was weakening. There's nothing going on between me and Stephanie. Stop lying. I slammed my hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. I saw your car at her place. I heard her voice on the phone. Do you think I'm stupid? Derek ran his hands through his hair in frustration. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Explain it to me, Derek. I'm all ears. He paced the kitchen, avoiding my gaze. Stephanie and I have been working on a surprise for you. A business venture we thought you might want to be part of. That's all. The absurdity of his lie made me laugh bitterly. A surprise that requires you to call in sick, to work and spend the day at her apartment. that requires her to call you and whisper that she loves you. Do you honestly expect me to believe that? Believe what you want, Derek snapped. I'm not having this conversation when you're being irrational and making wild accusations. Irrational? I'm being irrational for questioning why my husband is lying about his whereabouts and receiving love declarations from my best friend. Derek grabbed his keys from the counter. I need some air. We can talk when you've calmed down and are ready to be reasonable. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back tonight, I warned. He hesitated for just a moment before heading toward the front door. I need space. This is ridiculous. The door slammed behind him, leaving me alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the dinner I had prepared while my marriage crumbled. I sat there for hours, alternating between tears and anger, waiting for him to return. He never did. I spent the night alone in our bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our confrontation. Part of me still hoped for an innocent explanation, but deep down I knew the truth. The man I had loved and trusted for a decade had betrayed me in the worst possible way with someone I considered a sister. Morning came, and with it the realization that life as I knew it was over. The question now was how I would pick up the pieces and move forward. The next morning I called Stephanie's cell phone. My finger hovered over the call button for several minutes before I finally pressed it. She answered on the second ring. Corinne, hi. Her voice was falsely bright with an undercurrent of nervousness. We need to talk, I said flatly. Now. There was a pause before she responded. Is everything okay? No, everything is not okay. I know about you and Derek. Another pause longer this time. Corinne, don't insult me by denying it. I cut her off. I heard you on his phone yesterday. I saw his car at your apartment. I just want to hear you admit it. I heard her take a shaky breath. I never meant for this to happen, she finally said, her voice breaking. It just did. Even though I had known the truth, hearing her confirm it sent a fresh wave of pain through my chest. How long? I demanded. 6 months, she admitted quietly. 6 months. Half a year of deception. The timeline hit me hard. That meant it had started shortly after her divorce was finalized while I was still comforting her through her supposed heartbreak. Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you both happy making a fool of me indefinitely? It wasn't like that, Stephanie said, starting to cry. We felt terrible about it. We never wanted to hurt you. Spare me, I spat. If you didn't want to hurt me, you wouldn't have slept with my husband. You were my best friend, Stephanie. I trusted you. I know, she sobbed. I hate myself for it. But it just happened, and then we couldn't stop, and then... And then what? I pressed when she trailed off. Her next words destroyed whatever was left of my world. We fell in love. We were planning to tell you. Soon. Derek was going to ask for a divorce. The room spun around me. Not only had they been having an affair, but they had been planning a future together, planning to upend my life. Is he with you now? I asked, my voice hollow. Yes, she admitted. He came here last night after you fought. Put him on the phone. Corinne, I don't think that's a good idea right now. Everyone's upset, and... Put him on the phone, I shouted. There was muffled conversation, and then Derek's voice came through the line. Corinne, how could you... The question emerged as little more than a whisper. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, he said, sounding tired rather than remorseful. but it did, and now we have to deal with it like adults. Like adults, I repeated incredulously. Adults don't sneak around having affairs with their spouse's best friend. Adults don't lie and gaslight and betray the people who love them. I was going to tell you, he insisted. I just needed to find the right time. When would that have been, Derek? After our anniversary dinner, where you looked me in the eyes and said you'd never been happier. After we made love in that hotel room. When exactly were you planning to mention that? Oh, by the way, you're in love with my best friend. This isn't productive, he said coldly. We should talk when you're calmer. His dismissive tone ignited my anger. You don't get to decide the terms here. You lost that right when you decided to cheat. I want you to come get your things today while I'm not home. I'll be gone until 6. Anything you leave behind goes in the trash. Corinne, be reasonable. We need to discuss the house, our finances, how we're going to handle this. We'll discuss those things through lawyers, I said firmly. I'm done talking to you directly. This is exactly why things haven't been working between us, Derek said, his voice hardening. You're so rigid, so focused on your career and your plans. You never stop to consider what I might want or need. His attempt to blame me for his infidelity was the final straw. Don't you dare try to justify what you did by finding fault with me. You made a choice, Derek. You chose to betray me instead of talking to me about any issues in our marriage. That's on you, not me. I hung up before he could respond, then collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably. Everything I had believed about my life, my marriage, my friendships, had been a lie. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that I could barely breathe through the pain. Later that day, Amanda came over after I called her in tears. I finally told her everything. Her face reflected shock, then rage on my behalf. That absolute bastard, she fumed, pacing my living room. And Stephanie, I never would have thought she could do something so horrible. Neither did I said dully. That's what makes it worse. I trusted them both completely. What did you find out about the affair? When did it start? I recounted what Stephanie had told me, including the revelation that they had been planning to leave together. 6 months of lying to my face, attending dinners at our house, celebrating our anniversary, all while they were sneaking around behind my back. And some of our friends must have known, Amanda said, the realization dawning on her. If it's been going on that long, others in your social circle must have seen something or heard rumors. The thought that others might have been aware of my humiliation added another layer to the betrayal. Had people been pitying me, laughing at me behind my back? Derek is coming to get his things this afternoon, I told her. I can't be here when he does. I can't look at him. We'll go to my place, Amanda said decisively. Pack a bag. You can stay with me as long as you need to. When we returned to the house that evening, Derek had indeed collected many of his belongings. He had left his key on the kitchen counter along with a note that simply read, I'll have my lawyer contact you. No apology, no explanation, just the cold, practical next step. In the days that followed, mutual friends began to reach out. Some offered genuine support, expressing shock at the revelation. Others were awkwardly vague, and I could tell they had known or suspected something, but had chosen to remain silent. The worst was when Rachel, a woman whose husband worked with Derek, called to check on me. During our conversation, she let slip that she had seen Derek and Stephanie together at a restaurant in a neighboring town 2 months earlier. I assumed you knew and were okay with it, she said weakly when I confronted her. They weren't exactly hiding. The realization that my humiliation had been more public than I imagined was almost as painful as the betrayal itself. My world had not only shattered, it had been on display for others to witness and gossip about, while I remained oblivious. In the weeks following the discovery of Derek and Stephanie's affair, I spiraled into a dark place. I took a leave of absence from work, unable to focus on design projects, when my personal life was in such disarray. Most days I could barely get out of bed. The betrayal consumed my thoughts, playing on an endless loop in my mind. Amanda moved temporarily into my guest room, worried about leaving me alone in my fragile state. She would bring me tea and toast in the mornings, gently coaxing me to eat something, anything. At night, she would sit with me while I cried, offering silent support when there were no words that could possibly provide comfort. "It's not just the affair," I told her during one particularly difficult evening. "It's the magnitude of the deception. Every memory from the past 6 months is tainted now. Every time Derek said he loved me, every time Stephanie and I had lunch, and she asked about my marriage, every moment was a lie." "I know," Amanda said softly, holding my hand. "It's like they stole your reality from you." That was exactly how it felt. The foundations of my life had been revealed as illusions. I questioned everything, including my own judgment. How could I have been so blind? Were there signs I had ignored? Could I ever trust my instincts again? Sleep became elusive. When I did manage to drift off, nightmares would jolt me awake, visions of Derek and Stephanie laughing at me, mocking my ignorance. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame. Friends who visited would exchange worried glances, unsure how to help me through this devastation. Social media became a minefield, though I had unfriended both Derek and Stephanie. Mutual connections would occasionally share photos that included them. 2 weeks after our confrontation, I saw a picture of them together at a restaurant looking happy and untroubled. The casual way Derek had his arm around her, the intimate smile they shared, suggested this was far from new. They had transitioned seamlessly from secret affair to public couple while I was still struggling to get through each day. The online discovery sent me into a fresh tailspin of grief. I deactivated all my social media accounts that night, unable to bear the possibility of seeing them together again. Then came the ultimate public humiliation. Amanda and I had ventured out to a small bistro, my first real outing in weeks. We were seated at a corner table when the door opened and in walked Derek and Stephanie hand in hand. They didn't notice us immediately laughing about something as they were led to their table. When Stephanie spotted me, she froze, nudging Derek. His eyes met mine across the restaurant, and for a brief moment, I saw something like guilt flicker across his face. But he quickly composed himself, nodding stiffly in acknowledgement, before turning away. "Let's go," Amanda whispered, already reaching for her purse. "No," I said firmly, surprising myself. "I won't leave, but I haven't done anything wrong." We stayed, though I couldn't eat a bite of my food. Throughout the meal, I felt stares and whispers from other diners who had picked up on the uncomfortable dynamic. By the time we left, my face was burning with humiliation, but I'd made it through without breaking down a small victory in my journey of survival. The next day, I contacted a divorce attorney. His name was Michael Saunders, a partner at a respected firm specializing in high-conflict divorces. In his office, surrounded by law books and certificates, I recounted the whole sordid story. "Unfortunately, infidelity is something I see all too often," he said compassionately. "But that doesn't make it any less painful for the person experiencing it. I'm sorry you're going through this." "What should I expect?" I asked, trying to focus on practical matters. "Illinois is a no-fault divorce state, so the affair itself won't impact the division of assets directly," he explained. "But we'll need to do a complete financial review to ensure everything is properly accounted for." That conversation led to an unexpected revelation. As part of the divorce proceedings, we requested Derek's financial records. What emerged was another layer of betrayal. Derek had been siphoning money from our joint accounts into a separate account for the past 8 months, presumably preparing financially for his exit from our marriage. "This isn't unusual in cases like yours," Michael told me when presenting the findings. "But it does strengthen our position in negotiations." The discovery of financial deception was another blow, but strangely, it also helped solidify my resolve. The man I had loved was not who I thought he was. The Derek I married would never have methodically planned to abandon me, both emotionally and financially. Around this time, I received an unexpected message from Jackson Derek's colleague and friend. "I know we haven't talked since everything happened," he wrote, "but there are things you should know about Derek's behavior at work. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet." I was hesitant to trust anyone connected to Derek, but curiosity won out. We met at a coffee shop far from Wellington and Barnes. Jackson looked uncomfortable but determined. "I should have said something sooner," he began. "I knew about Derek and Stephanie for months, but he was my friend and I thought it wasn't my place to interfere." I nodded stiffly, unsure whether to be angry at him for his silence. "But what's happening now isn't right," he continued. "Derek has been telling everyone at the office that you were cold and distant, that you were never there for him emotionally. He's painting himself as the victim who found solace with someone who understood him." The character assassination hurt almost as much as the affair itself. Derek wasn't just betraying me, he was actively trying to destroy my reputation to justify his actions. "There's more," Jackson said, sliding a folder across the table. "Derek has been engaging in some questionable practices with client accounts. Nothing overtly illegal, but definitely in ethical gray areas. I've documented what I've observed." The information Jackson provided became valuable leverage in the divorce negotiations. While I had no interest in ruining Derek's career, the possibility that his professional conduct might come under scrutiny motivated him to be more reasonable in our settlement discussions. Despite these small victories, I hit rock bottom about 2 months after discovering the affair. It was a rainy night, and I was alone in the house, Amanda having returned to her own apartment now that I seemed more stable. I found myself wandering from room to room, touching furniture and decorations that had once represented our shared life. In our bedroom closet, I discovered a shoebox of photographs I had forgotten about. Wedding pictures, vacation, snapshots, candid moments of happiness. Among them was a photo of Derek, Stephanie, and me at a charity event the previous year. We were smiling, arms around each other, the picture of friendship and marital bliss. The sight of it crushed me anew. I sank to the floor, clutching the photograph and sobbing uncontrollably. For hours, I remained there, surrounded by the debris of my former life, feeling more alone than I ever had before. But something unexpected happened as the night wore on. As I sat in the darkness listening to the rain against the windows, A strange calm began to settle over me. The pain didn't disappear, but it shifted, somehow becoming less sharp, more manageable. I looked again at the photograph in my hands, seeing it with new eyes. The woman in that picture, smiling naively between her husband and best friend, was gone. She had been destroyed by their betrayal. But in her place, a new version of me was slowly emerging, one forged in the fire of this terrible experience. That night, I made a decision. I would no longer allow Derek and Stephanie's actions to define me or determine my future. I would reclaim my life, my dignity, and my power. Not because I was over the pain, but because I refused to let it consume me any longer. The next morning, I called my boss and told her I was ready to return to work. I then contacted a real estate agent to discuss selling the house, a space now, too, filled with painful memories, to ever feel like home again. And finally, I reached out to a therapist, recognizing that professional help would be crucial in processing the trauma of betrayal. These were small steps, but they represented a turning point in my journey. For the first time since answering Derek's phone, that fateful morning, I felt a glimmer of hope that I might someday be whole again. My return to work proved to be more therapeutic than I anticipated. Immersing myself in design projects provided a welcome distraction from the ongoing divorce proceedings and the emotional aftermath of betrayal. My colleagues were supportive, respecting my privacy, while offering quiet encouragement. I threw myself into a particularly challenging project, redesigning the interior of a historic building being converted into luxury apartments. The complexity of the work demanded my complete focus, leaving little mental space for dwelling on Derek and Stephanie. Each decision about color palettes, material selections, and spatial arrangements represented a small step back toward the person I used to be, the talented designer who took pride in her work. At home, I embarked on another form of reclamation. I decided not to sell the house immediately, instead, choosing to completely transform it. Room by room, I exorcised Derek's presence. I repainted walls, replaced furniture, and rearranged spaces according to my preferences alone. The master bedroom, once the site of so many painful memories, was the first to undergo metamorphosis. I replaced our old king bed with a new queen, changed the wall color from Derek's preferred beige to a soothing sage green, and invested in luxurious new bedding that was entirely my style. "This is absolutely stunning," Amanda remarked when she saw the redesigned bedroom. "It doesn't even feel like the same space." "That was the point," I replied with a small smile. The renovation process became a metaphor for my internal healing. Just as I was stripping away old paint and replacing worn fixtures, I was removing the layers of pain and betrayal to reveal something new underneath. It wasn't about erasing what had happened, but about creating something different and wholly mine from the remnants. As I reclaimed my physical space, I also began addressing the social fallout of the affair. Many of our mutual friends had awkwardly drifted away, unsure where their loyalties should lie or simply uncomfortable with the messiness of our situation. But a few had remained steadfastly in my corner, and I focused on strengthening those genuine connections. There were also confrontations I needed to have. Rachel, who had seen Derek and Stephanie together months before I discovered the affair, agreed to meet me for coffee. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked her directly once we were seated with our drinks. She shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know for sure what was happening, and even if I had, it wasn't my place to get involved. If you saw your friend's spouse cheating, you wouldn't tell them, you'd let them continue being humiliated while everyone else knew. "I'm sorry, Corinne," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I convinced myself it wasn't my business. That was wrong. These conversations were difficult but necessary. I needed to understand who I could trust moving forward, who had the moral courage to be honest, even when it was uncomfortable. In the process, I discovered that authentic friendships, though fewer in number, were far more valuable than a large social circle built on superficial connections. The divorce settlement negotiations continued through my attorney. Derek, perhaps motivated by Jackson's revelations about his professional conduct, proved surprisingly amenable to a fair division of assets. The financial deception he had engaged in actually worked against him, as the court looked unfavorably on his secretive movement of funds. In the end, I received a settlement that provided financial security as I rebuilt my life. Throughout this period, I heard occasional updates about Derek and Stephanie. Their relationship, built on the unstable foundation of deception, had begun to show cracks. According to Jackson, who remained a surprisingly loyal ally, Derek had been passed over for a promotion due to concerns about his judgment. Stephanie, facing coldness from many former friends who disapproved of how their relationship began, had become increasingly insecure and demanding. "They argue constantly at work," Jackson told me during one of our occasional coffee meetings. Last week, she accused him of flirting with the new marketing coordinator. The irony seems lost on her. I took no pleasure in their troubles, but neither did I feel sympathy. They were experiencing the natural consequences of their choices, just as I had been forced to deal with the aftermath of their betrayal. My own healing journey led me to weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Melanie Rossi, a specialist in recovery from relationship trauma. And in her comfortable office with its soft lighting and calming blue walls, I gradually unpacked the complex emotions surrounding the affair. Betrayal trauma is particularly devastating, Dr. Rossi explained during an early session, because it undermines your basic understanding of reality. The people you trusted most were presenting a false narrative, which makes you question your own perceptions and judgment. Through our work together, I began to recognize that Derek and Stephanie's choices reflected their character flaws, not my worthiness of love and loyalty. I hadn't caused the affair by being too focused on my career, as Derek had claimed. The responsibility for their deception lay entirely with them. "The path to healing isn't about forgetting what happened," Dr. Rossi told me. "It's about integrating this experience into your life story in a way that acknowledges the pain, but doesn't allow it to define your future." That perspective resonated deeply with me. I didn't want to be permanently identified as the woman whose husband cheated with her best friend. I wanted to be Corinne again, a whole person with passions, talents, and dreams that existed independently of that betrayal. 6 months after discovering the affair, I made a decision that surprised even me. I started volunteering at a women's center, leading workshops on financial independence after divorce. Sharing my experience and the practical knowledge I had gained through my own divorce process helped transform my pain into something useful for others. When my ex-husband started moving money to secret accounts, I had no idea, I told a group of women during one workshop. But now I understand the warning signs and how to protect yourself financially during a separation. The gratitude in their eyes as they took notes and asked questions gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. My suffering, terrible as it had been, could serve as a roadmap for others navigating similar terrain. As the 1-year anniversary of the phone call that changed everything approached, I found myself in a place I couldn't have imagined during those dark early days. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. I still had moments of anger and sadness, but they no longer controlled me. I had rebuilt my life on my terms, creating new routines, new spaces, and new relationships that reflected who I was becoming rather than who I had been. It was during this period of relative calm that I unexpectedly reconnected with Alex Martinez, a landscape architect I had collaborated with on a project years earlier. We bumped into each other at a home and garden show where I was sourcing materials for a client. "Corinne Williams," he said with genuine warmth. "It's been, 3 years?" "At least," I replied, smiling at the familiar face. "How have you been?" What started as casual catching up over coffee at the show led to an exchange of professional contacts, which evolved into occasional texts about interesting design ideas, which eventually resulted in dinner to discuss a potential collaboration. I approached this budding connection with caution, hyper-aware of my still healing heart. But there was something refreshing about Alex's straightforward nature. His passion for his work and the easy way conversation flowed between us. "I heard about your divorce," he mentioned during our third dinner together. "I'm sorry you went through that." "Thank you," I said, simply appreciating that he acknowledged it without prying for details. "I went through something similar a few years back," he continued. "Not the same circumstances, but the same feeling of having the rug pulled out from under you." His understanding, born from his own experience, created a space where I felt seen rather than pitied. We were two people who had weathered difficult storms and emerged changed but intact. I didn't know if our connection would develop into something romantic, and I was in no rush to find out. What mattered was that I was open to possibilities again, no longer defined solely by what I had lost. The journey from that devastating Tuesday morning when I answered Derek's phone to where I stood, a year later, had been arduous and painful. I had lost my marriage, my best friend, and my naive trust in others. But in their place, I had gained resilience, wisdom, and a deeper understanding of my own strength. The betrayal had nearly broken me, but in the process of putting myself back together, I had created something stronger and more authentic than before. I had learned that trust, once shattered, could be rebuilt first with yourself and then carefully with others who proved worthy of it. As I stood in my redesigned living room, looking out at the garden I had replanted that spring, I reflected on the most important lesson of all pain. However devastating is not the end of the story, and it's a chapter, perhaps a long and difficult one, but never the conclusion. What matters is how we choose to write the pages that follow. And if you're watching this and struggling with betrayal or loss, know that the darkness eventually gives way to light. The path forward isn't about forgetting what happened, but about refusing to let it determine who you become. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, your story isn't over yet either.